Cabin Sports Radio.
Here comes the siren. I want to go higher. Oh, my goodness. Batista with a drive. Deep left field. No doubt about it. Oshie will defend. Oh! LeBron James with no regard for human life.
Pass is intercepted at the goal line by Malcolm Butler. Unreal.
Oh, baby, for sure.
Cabin Sports Radio starts now.
Cabin Sports Radio, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Back for another week. Unbreakable Mike Gibbons in the house as always. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing good, brother. How are you?
Not too bad. Big show coming up. We got Maggie Carson, Team NT flag bearer on the show. Very special interview with her, so make sure you stay tuned for that. Going to talk some CFL free agency, NHL Trade Deadline, and Lin-Sanity coming to Toronto? Find out.
Cabin Sports Radio.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Check out sportnorth.com. And big week for them and big week for Team NT as they make the final preparations before heading to Red Deer ahead of the Canada Winter Games. And we will hear from Maggie Carson, Team NT's flag bearer, a little bit later on in the show. But first, we're going to start off. Well, you know what? First, actually, I'm going to start off with telling you, Mike, I went home for lunch today. And turned on Sportsnet. Bob McGowan, Primetime Sports, was on, as it always is, and has been for our entire lifetime plus. And, I was just turning on, eating my lunch, and was expecting to hear, maybe a little sports news, a little chat. I heard about 15 minutes or so of Bob McGowan and John Shannon exchanging wedding stories.
Oh, wow.
I wasn't expecting that.
No.
I gotta say. Now, I mean, Bob McGowan's been the guy, the pinnacle of sports talk radio excellence for, like I said, our entire lifetimes. Plus, I don't know exactly when he started, but I think sometime in the 80s. But he's been around literally forever. I was thinking to myself, only Bob McGowan could get away with that.
Yeah.
Only Bob McGowan has the kind of audience that has been with him long enough and is dedicated enough to endure 15 plus minutes
and would watch
of him and John Shannon.
And watch a television show of it. I've caught myself doing that before. I think actually the last time before the holidays I was in Toronto, I caught an episode. I was about to see a Raptor game that night. I was hanging out in the hotel room and tuning in to some Bob McGowan. And it was my lucky day because I guess it was the first time in a decade or something like that he actually opened up the phone lines.
Oh, wow.
I guess according to him anyways. I don't know what the actual timeline was, but I guess he doesn't do it all that often.
Yeah.
I'm sure. I think it had to do with the whole Nylander contract because that was still up in the air. But I thought that was a really special moment in time.
I think he just gets annoyed with callers.
Yeah.
I don't know. He just has no time for them.
He had some genuine back and forth, and there are people from the States calling, people from all over Ontario, from the West, from not quite this neck of the woods, but Western Canada, anyways.
A brand new era for primetime sports. A kinder, gentler.
Maybe one day
Bob McGowan.
open up the phone line.
Yeah, one day when we get a phone.
That's right.
All right, kicking things off at Cabin Sports Radio. Some pretty big news coming out of the Raptors camp in the NBA. Lin-Sanity could be headed to Toronto. Mike, I do not understand. I read a couple articles today. For the life of me, I don't understand this mid-season buyout situation in the NBA. I need an explanation.
So much like the NHL, there's all the excitement around trade deadline. So we had that last week in the NBA, February 7th. But that's not all there is as far as contenders are concerned. So I guess the biggest news out of last week was the non-story, really, that Anthony Davis wasn't moved. A couple other key pieces. Mike Conley from the Grizzlies wasn't moved. But that's an activity that everyone sort of gets in on. With the buyout market, it's really a chance for contenders. So the teams that really have the best chance of having deep playoff runs to get that extra rotation piece or role piece. You don't really see huge names enter the buyout market. It's more, they tend to mostly be misfits or journeymen, usually veterans who are on losing teams, not
Okay.
in situations they would like to be in, and contenders will try to swoop them. So what has to happen first? The team that they're currently under contract with, they have to come to some sort of agreement on separation and what funds they're owed. And then they would agree to that mutually, whether it's they leave all the money on the table that they were owed up into that point, beyond the point of their playing days.
Right.
They could be in store for more of that to which they are owed. But anyways, they come to that agreement mutually, and then they would be waived by the team, which would make them eligible for any other franchise. So after the Raptors pulled off a fairly significant trade last week, we knew that they would be big players in the buyout market.
Right.
One, because of their roster size. In the Gasol trade, they had 3 Raptors going the other way, and then also lost Greg Monroe and Malachi Richardson in separate trades. So right there, you're down 5, you bring in 1, so you're ultimately down 4. And Masai Ujiri made it pretty clear that the Raptors would be aggressive in the buyout market.
Okay.
There are still some pretty notable names out there, but Lin-Sanity, Jeremy Lin, who it's looking like he'll be bought out by the Atlanta Hawks, who are going absolutely nowhere. This would be a fairly substantial pickup for the Raptors, who was seen as one of the highest targets as far as the buyout market is concerned.
Okay, so that's pretty interesting. Obviously, he's still got some pretty good life left in his career. Could be a big help to the Raptors, as you mentioned. They needed some depth at the point guard position, so could fit really well there. Wanted to get your thoughts on the Jonas Valanciunas trade. That happened last week after our last episode.
Yep.
What do you think of that trade?
Well, it had to happen.
Yeah.
You've got 4 legitimate contenders in the Eastern Conference right now, with the Milwaukee Bucks still holding down first place and getting even stronger with the addition of Nikola Mirotic, who's someone that the Raptors were going after. 6'10", power forward, can space the floor, shoot the 3, does all the things you need to do in that 4 position, has played beside another elite big in Anthony Davis, who we mentioned was not moved, but knows how to play with another big and space the floor. So he was a well sought after commodity. Unfortunate for the Raptors that they couldn't come to any sort of deal. I don't know if they tried to propose anything to the Pelicans to try and pry him away from them. Milwaukee ends up signing him, trading him rather. So the Raptors were forced to make a play, especially after the 76ers made a trade to acquire Tobias Harris too. They've got a formidable starting lineup now. Questions surrounding their depth a little bit. Had to give up some pieces to get Tobias into their starting rotation. And you figure once the Celtics figure it out too, they're not going to make any moves, probably not in the buyout market. Didn't make any splashes on trade deadline day. We knew the whole contract situation. We knew they weren't players for Anthony Davis, given that they already have Irving under contract with the same rookie extension clause. The Rose Rule, they call it. That Anthony Davis has. You can't have 2 on the same team. So we knew they wouldn't make a play.
Okay.
But when you see the other 2 contenders in the Eastern Conference make a play, you knew Masai was going to pull the trigger on something. Ends up sending Jonas Valanciunas, DeLon Wright, CJ Miles, and a 2nd-round pick to the Memphis Grizzlies for Marc Gasol. So this is someone that's been on the Raptors' radar for a long time. The two parties have been linked for quite some time now. It would have been nice to get this a couple of years ago. He's 34 years old. He's probably past his prime. But as far as floor spacing bigs go, he's an elite passer. Really a significant, not significant, because Jonas was having an impressive season in reduced minutes with the Raptors this year, and I mean his ceiling would be higher. He's 26 years old. But even still, on both sides of the floor, Gasol is a definite improvement. An elite passer. Plays really well, big to big, can space the floor, shoot the 3, a very savvy, smart defender. And you saw that even in limited minutes in his debut against the Knicks over the weekend. He communicates on defense. He's good against other bigs, can switch. So this is definitely an improvement. And then once you factor in this buyout acquisition, should it come to pass, which it's looking like it will, the Raptors are definitely a better team as they get ready for a postseason push.
So something that kind of had to happen.
It had to.
Yeah.
As soon as you saw the Bucks and the Sixers making big splashes, you knew it was a matter of time. It did come through pretty late, but right before the trade deadline, this was the trigger was pulled by Masai.
Right.
You figured it was coming, and good for their sake.
And all things considered, staying consistent with the thought being that this is a window year for the Toronto Raptors. This is a year, obviously right from the start of the season, the trade for Kawhi Leonard. This is a season when they think they have a legitimate shot at making a run at it. So it's the time to make a move like that if you think that is going to improve your team in the short term, and that's clearly kind of the way they're heading right now.
And it's funny because LeBron made a comment. I believe it was in the headlines last week. Yeah, those 4 teams are gearing up for a deep run because they don't have to go through me. And that's totally fair.
It's just the truth.
He dragged a pretty bad Cleveland Cavaliers team to the finals last year, beating Boston on the way, beating Toronto on the way. He's out of the picture now, and now you've got these 4 teams, really not a whole lot separating those 4. You could see almost any of them making their way to the NBA Finals. And the buyout market, we could still see some transactions. The biggest name still hanging out there is Carmelo Anthony. Signed with the Rockets, played, or I think it was around just shy of 15 games with them this season. No longer a part of that club, was officially traded and waived. So he's still eligible. Lots of big men, really. If people are looking to solidify some depth at the 5 position, Robin Lopez, Marcin Gortat, Markieff Morris, Enes Kanter, disgruntled New York Knicks star. But you did mention the depth. And this was really a move that the Raptors had to make after getting rid of both Wright and Malachi Richardson, because we found out today Fred VanVleet will miss the next 3 weeks with a pretty significant thumb injury. So that would have left the Raptors very thin, really just Kyle Lowry at the point guard position. So good timing. And there's also that last name you'll see that I just threw on the list there.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah.
Yep. Before we get to that, though, you're a young fella, pretty savvy with the social media.
Sure.
You're still on Snapchat, right?
Yeah.
Kind of.
I don't follow it too much anymore.
Okay. Well, I'm not actually 100% sure if it was Snapchat or if it was Twitter, because I'm not savvy with social media.
Fair.
I'm still a young fella by some people's definition, but I did happen to see earlier today someone had caught a video over the weekend of Jonas Valanciunas in Pearson International Airport getting ready to leave Toronto, and apparently he looked really sad, which was so heartbreaking to see.
Yeah.
And so, of course, us being a generation of smart-ass clowns, someone decided, well, we got to put some sad music behind this.
Yeah.
And so, there's a video floating around of Valanciunas getting ready to leave Toronto Pearson International Airport with sad music and just looking heartbroken.
Well, the day that the trade was announced, the Raptors had a game on last Thursday. I can't remember who they were playing at the time. He was supposed to make his return to the lineup. He'd missed weeks with us. He had dislocated his thumb in a game against Golden State. Was that before the holidays or early January? I think it was even before then. He had missed an extensive period of time, and Thursday was supposed to mark his return to the lineup, and he finds out. I think the Raptors social media team did a similar, guess who's back?
Yeah.
2 hours later, guess who's gone? It was, I feel for him. It probably was really sad. He loved Toronto. It's all he'd ever known. He's been with the franchise since he was drafted. So that's 2 long-term Raptors we have seen part in the last couple months alone.
It's tough, and I mean his parting words, if you will, they kind of seemed reminiscent of DeMar DeRozan.
He wanted to be in the picture.
Yeah, he wanted to be a Raptor, and he's really sad to leave it. Yeah. It's tough. I mean, when you got guys that buy in like that, I don't know if obviously at certain points they make it very apparent as to whether or not they're engaged in the team or not, and whether or not they've bought in. It's tough when you see guys like that go.
Yeah, I bring up LeBron again, but he says anything and we listen because he's so much bigger.
Well, that's right.
So much bigger than basketball. He made an interesting comment last week as well. mid-game, Harrison Barnes of the Dallas Mavericks was traded. He found out, I think it was in the third quarter, so he was pulled from the game, and you can just see him sitting on the bench. He would have received word at that point, and he's just looking off into the abyss, emotionless, because he had just found out that he was traded from the team he was currently playing for. And James went on a bit of a rant saying how ironic it is that, they're the villains if they want to test free agency,
right,
or if they want to demand a trade. But
no, it's ironic. He's got a great point.
Yeah,
absolutely. And no one would know it better than him.
But it's just business.
Yeah,
if the team stabs you in the back and sends you packing.
Absolutely, it's just business. Worst part of the game, but it's what we get really excited about.
It's true. It's very true.
But yes, you mentioned earlier, you referenced the last name that you have on your note sheet here, which is Vince Carter. Could he return to Toronto?
It would be a good news story, wouldn't it?
That would be amazing.
It'd be a good sports story. Another potential buyout market candidate was at periods linked to the Raptors last year. It would just be a good story. He's a veteran player, opened his career with the Raptors, potentially closing a chapter there, and he is a candidate as part of this buyout market. A current teammate of Jeremy Lin on the Atlanta Hawks, who again are not going anywhere. So if any contenders feel that he could make a difference in their locker room, why not? So we'll see. Vin and Lin-Sanity.
That's crazy. Can you imagine the possibilities?
The puns.
Cabin Sports Radio continues with Team NT's flag bearer, Maggie Carson. That is coming up next.
The Cabin Sports Radio podcast, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Back on Cabin Sports Radio, and we have got a very special guest in studio. February 5th, Team NT announced Maggie Carson will be their official flag bearer at the 2019 Canada Winter Games opening ceremonies, which are going down February 15th at 6:30 p.m. And Maggie is our very special guest here on Cabin Sports Radio tonight. How you doing, Maggie?
I'm doing really good.
So a whole lot of Northerners are going to be watching. I'm sure you're expecting that. How are you handling the nerves?
I think I'm handling them pretty good. I haven't really given a lot of thought to the nerves, but yeah, I'm really excited.
Sorry to stoke that up for you. So the theme for this year's opening ceremonies at the 2019 Winter Games is a celebration of moments. In the Sport North Team NT press release, Chef de Mission Bill Othmer described picking you as the flag bearer as a true celebration of the moments that brought you back to competing and representing Team NT on the national stage at the Canada Winter Games. Now, your story is a pretty incredible one for those who don't know, and I want you to tell it in your own words. So, as long as you feel comfortable doing so, let's go back to what was actually your last competitive gymnastics competition, which was just over 2 years ago, December 2016 in Vancouver. Tell us everything that has happened from then until now.
So, Vancouver 2016, I went to a competition, and the very last day I woke up and I was having symptoms, I guess you could call them, of not being able to talk, I couldn't talk, I couldn't move my hands properly, I couldn't walk properly, I couldn't really do anything normal. And then my coach knew something was off, so she took me to the hospital and in Burnaby, and I got checked out there, and then they did a CT scan and they found my brain tumor. And then I was transferred to the Children's Hospital in Vancouver. And there, 2 days after my competition, I was booked to have brain surgery on the 14th of December. And so I had my surgery, and then I stayed in the hospital for about a week and a half or 2 weeks, and then we got our results back, and it was benign, so not cancerous. So we immediately after that, we got tickets to go back home because it was right around Christmas time and we really wanted to go home. After that, I got home, we celebrated Christmas, and then 3 weeks later I was back in the gym training and getting back into things. After that, I went for my 3-month follow-up, and the results came back that my tumor had grown back. So we booked another surgery for, I think it was April, and then I had a big competition coming up, or I had hoped to compete at. So I wanted to wait till after that, but then I started getting symptoms of
just the same kind of symptoms.
Yeah, and so we moved my surgery back up to March 18th, and then I had that surgery, and everything went really well. And because it grew back so fast, I had to start chemotherapy, and I started chemo in May, and me and my mom moved to Vancouver for 3 months, and I went through chemo for 3 months, and then I started getting treatment in Yellowknife, and then I started training again, and then from there, the chemo clinic in Yellowknife got shut down, and so then we had to go to Edmonton every week for chemo, and we did that for 6 months, and then the clinic reopened, and I continued my treatment back in Yellowknife, and I finished treatment in Yellowknife, and the MRI scans since the surgery, I got MRI scans every 3 months after the surgery, and they all came back stable, no improvements and no growth, so that was really good. And then I ended chemo on September 7th, 2018. Since then, I've just been training and getting back to school, and yeah.
So you've been training on and off this whole time, correct? From that 2 years ago to now, you've been training this whole time.
Yes.
That's amazing. You haven't been able to compete though, correct?
No.
So after going through something, such a struggle for 2 years that's keeping you from something you love, I got to ask, with all you've experienced and overcome to get to this point, how has sports changed for you? Has it changed at all the feeling of competition and the spirit when you're going in to compete, and what some people call the fight of competition? Has that changed for you at all?
It hasn't changed a whole lot, but I think it does put things in different perspectives, because from my experience, it's definitely taught me to live in the moment, and sports is something I really enjoy and really love. So definitely I think getting back to sports and getting back to normal life has really put me in the mindset to live in the moment and don't take things for granted.
Has having that gymnastics as a passion, has that kind of helped you just focus on pushing ahead and just doing what needs to be done to get there, you think?
I definitely think so. The mindset of gymnastics is you can't think about what happens on bars. You have to move on and do your best on the next event, and I definitely think that goes the same way for life things, like normal things that happen in life. You have your ups and downs, and I definitely think that that it's generally the same thing. You need to push through. You need to forget what happened in the past because you have to live in the moment. It's now that matters, not what happened in the past.
So you are going into your first competition since that tumor was discovered back in December 2016. How are you feeling going into that?
I'm really excited to be able to compete again, especially with my best friends. And I'm a little bit nervous because I haven't competed in 2 years, but I know I'm working really hard in the gym, and I think it's going to be an amazing experience to have as my first competition back.
Amazing. Well, we are all going to be rooting for you. You've got so many people that are going to be behind you and watching your every move, every competition. And of course, they will be seeing you carrying the Team NT flag into Red Deer for the opening ceremonies. Maggie, thank you so much for joining us on Cabin Sports Radio, and good luck in Red Deer.
Thank you so much.
The CSR Podcast.
Cabin Sports Radio brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. So the CFL free agency period begins officially tomorrow, Tuesday, February 12th. If you're listening to the CSR podcast, then possibly today, or maybe it started yesterday. We don't know your life. Mike Riley, the big story heading into CFL free agency. He was given permission to speak with other clubs heading into this past weekend. The conventional wisdom appears to be that he is likely headed to BC, which would be a huge blow to the Edmonton Eskimos. He has been arguably the best quarterback in the CFL for the past 3 years, at least. He's been the CFL leading passer the last 3 years, 3 5,000-yard plus seasons in a row. His stats have been sparkling. The Edmonton Eskimos last year were not. Their season ended with a thud. Started off great and then just slowly got worse and worse as the season went on. And Mike Riley was not immune from that trending for the Edmonton Eskimos last year. Mike Riley was very much a part of why things were failing. So I will put that out there. He's 34 years old. He's been with the club since 2013. He's still a great quarterback. He's still got lots of legs, but a different player than, this time 4 or 5 years ago when he was previously on the free agency market. And at that time was the hottest ticket as well. A little bit of a different situation for him now.
If you're reading reports out of Edmonton, obviously the face of the franchise, a guy who's averaged about 5,500 yards over those 3 seasons you alluded to, usually hitting around 30 TDs, had 18 interceptions last year. It's as much what he contributes on the field as he does off the field that it seems like the franchise will miss. The ultimate professional is what other people within the organization and outside, whether it be business partners, sponsors, that's how they describe him. He was the face of the team, that veteran type of presence. But an offer from another team might prove to be too much for the Eskimos, sounding like it would be in the range of $700,000. No idea if we can corroborate that, but that appears to be the bid from the BC Lions. I believe I read a report out of Edmonton Journal earlier today that basically the organization there said, name your price. So it may just be a case in the twilight stage of his career where he's got a summer home in Seattle. That's only 3 hours away from Vancouver.
Right.
Maybe just after a 6-year run with the Eskimos, looking for a change of scenery.
It's an interesting situation, and we were kind of wondering off the top of the show why BC. Like you mentioned, he's got a summer home in Seattle. He started his CFL career in BC, so we thought maybe there's something there. Then it just kind of clicked. Ed Hervey, former Edmonton Eskimo wide receiver and former Edmonton Eskimo general manager, is now the GM of the BC Lions and would have been the GM when that brought Mike Riley over to Edmonton. So I'm thinking there's probably something there, too, that he wants to follow Ed Hervey over to BC. The Lions are in a really good situation to eat that contract. Jonathan Jennings, who has been their He was supposed to be their starting quarterback for the last 3 years. He has been given every opportunity and has just not grabbed the brass ring, so to speak. He informed the Lions a couple weeks ago ahead of CFL free agency that he was planning on testing the free agent waters. So that pretty much made their decision for them. They didn't have to decide, do we want to keep this guy? Do we want to continue this project of him being our starting quarterback, or do we go elsewhere? He kind of made that decision for them. They've still got Travis Lulay, who's been there for a long time and has performed admirably in the moments where they've needed him, and Jonathan Jennings has not performed up to snuff, but he is obviously not the way forward for the BC Lions. He is, he's getting up there in years. He's at the end of his career. I think he still wants to play, but I think he is better suited in a backup role. So the BC Lions are in a good situation to take on, like you say, the projected of possibly $700,000 contract of Mike Riley. But if the Edmonton Eskimos, and I don't really personally understand why the Eskimos aren't necessarily in that situation. I don't know that they have a whole lot of contracts that are eating up their cap space. But either way, they don't necessarily. It kind of seems like a situation where if Mike Riley decides that he wants Edmonton to be an option, they'll make room for him. But if he decides that he's going to go elsewhere, then the Edmonton Eskimos just have to react. And apparently, so Dave Naylor and Farhan Lalji reported on TSN that if Riley does head to BC, Edmonton will then likely be heavily pursuing Trevor Harris, possibly former, current Ottawa Red Black quarterback to fill that spot.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. In the next couple weeks, months even, if this free agency period is anything like what we're seeing in the MLB right now, you kind of hope not. But the QB position will be pretty critical, and it should set the tone. We could be looking at some very different makeups, different rosters come opening day. Bo Levi Mitchell, Mike Riley, Trevor Harris, Zach Collaros. You got lots of quarterbacks hitting free agency tomorrow that could dramatically alter the landscape of the league. Mitchell will reportedly look at NFL options. And we were talking about Riley. Yeah, it's looking like reports out of Edmonton suggesting that he's going to BC. But you'd expect he'd be getting some phone calls from a majority of the league.
Absolutely.
Once he gets, once other teams get permission to reach out to him. So we could see some significant changes in the next couple of weeks. Yeah,
it could be an interesting year, especially like you mentioned, Bo Levi Mitchell. Pretty much ever since the Grey Cup game was said and done, it's been pretty much a given that he was going to look south and entertain offers of heading to the NFL. You know, who knows? Maybe as a starter, maybe as a backup. We all know that a backup quarterback, even a third string quarterback in the NFL, makes probably about the same as a starting quarterback, like a star quarterback in the CFL. So there always is that temptation that, you know, do you go for the money and the potential opportunity, even though you might be holding a clipboard all season, or do you want to stay where you're actually going to get to play and throw passes and be a star? You know, it all kind of depends on what you're looking for. John Hufnagel, the Calgary Stampeders general manager, came out in a statement saying that he actually thinks there's a pretty good chance that Bo will stay in Calgary. So I don't know if he's got some inkling. Maybe he's had some conversations with Bo that have led him to believe that there's a good chance that he stays in Canada. But you got to think, if you are John Hufnagel and you are the Calgary Stampeders, you are seriously starting to consider your backup options. This might be the first time that I can recall since kind of the Doug Flutie, Jeff Garcia era, where the Calgary Stampeders haven't had a guy that's waiting in the wings and is ready to take on that starting quarterback position. You know, there's no doubt in anyone's minds. Bo Levi Mitchell was that guy. He worked at the craft in the third and second string position for years, got his shot as the starter, has not looked back, has made good as, again, you put him beside Mike Riley as arguably the best quarterback in the CFL. Who knows? It's really going to be an interesting offseason, probably the most interesting CFL offseason I can think of in recent years. There have been a few late re-signings, and interesting for Mike Riley in particular that Brian Burnham has been re-signed by the BC Lions. So if Mike Riley does decide to head west, he can rest assured that he will have one of the CFL's best targets to throw to there. So that's potentially something he may consider as well. But then again, Mike Riley is, he just likes to throw the ball, and he kind of makes receivers just look better as a result.
Well, and he's helped teammates win matching receiving titles over his 6 years in Edmonton as well. So if there are some changes, there are certainly no shortage of other quarterbacks that you could bring into the fold. So we should find out in time. Yeah,
it could be a very interesting shuffle at the pivot position. More as Cabin Sports Radio continues. We're going to keep talking about possible roster transactions.
That's right.
Because like I said earlier, it's the worst part about sports for the actual athletes, but it's interesting to us. NHL Trade Deadline Watch Talk next on Cabin Sports Radio.
You're listening to Cabin Sports Radio, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward.
Cabin Sports Radio, brought to you by Sport North, moving sport forward. Check out sportnorth.com for more. And to follow along at the Canada Winter Games, head to the Canada Winter Games website. You can keep track of everything Team NT and keep track of how we are doing at the games. Very exciting stuff. That's coming up next week. NHL Trade Deadline Watch is 2 weeks from now. The NHL Trade Deadline is Monday, February 28th?
25th.
25th.
Yeah.
I can't do math.
That's okay.
It's been very interesting leading up to this point. Let's just do a quick rundown of a few trades, a few major-ish deals that have been made within the past couple weeks. Of course, we broke the story.
Yeah.
We didn't break the story. We just talked
Pretty much
about,
did.
Pretty much. Close enough. We were an hour away.
Yeah, that's true.
Jake Muzzin, of course, joining the Toronto Maple Leafs from the LA Kings for a couple spare parts and a first-round draft pick. Ryan Murphy was traded from the New Jersey Devils 2 days later to the Minnesota Wild for Michael Kapla. The Pittsburgh Penguins then made a really interesting deal on February 1st, sending Derek Brassard and Riley Sheehan and a second-round pick and 2 fourth-round picks to the Florida Panthers for forward Nick Bjugstad and Jared McCann. A very interesting deal that a lot of people are saying is a big win for the Penguins. Nick Bjugstad expected to play a pretty major role, and honestly, I think he's got some shoes to fill with filling in for some depth scoring. Derek Brassard filled in as a very good third line center for that team. Bjugstad, though, apparently expected to upgrade at that position, so we'll see how that plays out for the Pittsburgh Penguins. The Colorado Avalanche made a minor deal with the Ottawa Senators. That one wasn't important. The New Jersey Devils sent Brian Boyle to the Nashville Predators, which could be a very interesting move. The Predators got even bigger a little bit later on that same day on February 6th, acquiring Cody McLeod for the New York Rangers. Reacquiring Cody McLeod, as he is a former Nashville Predator, now rejoining the team. They made a couple more moves with the Coyotes, picking up Adam Halikwa and Laurent Dauphin. The Montreal Canadiens have actually made a couple moves over the weekend.
Today?
Pulled one off this morning. Yes, they acquired Nate Thompson from the LA Kings, sent a 5th-round pick to LA, and got a 4th-round pick back. That could be an interesting one for them. Kind of addresses a need of theirs for a little more grit up front, a little more size. And along that same thought, Dale Weiss rejoining the Montreal Canadiens from the Philadelphia Flyers with defenseman Christian Folan. They sent defenseman David Schlemko and forward Byron Froese back the other way. And the Pittsburgh Penguins made another move today, acquiring defenseman Blake Siebenaler. I'm not even sure how to pronounce that. For a conditional 7th-round pick from the Columbus Blue Jackets. So there has been some movement, not a whole lot of excitement, just a couple notable moves ahead of the trade deadline, which, as we mentioned, is just 2 weeks away now. But we're expecting to see it pick up anytime now. There's been a lot of interesting rumors, interesting names floating around, but some situations emerging situations that are kind of muddying the waters a bit, and making it a little bit more interesting.
Well, look at the Metropolitan Division. Suddenly, the hottest team in the NHL, the entire NHL, the Philadelphia Flyers.
Yeah.
9-0-1 in their last 10, and they had, you would think, some parts that they were willing to ship out of town. You mentioned teams wanting to get after a gritty sort of forward-type player. Well, I'd say Mr. Wayne Simmons fits that mold.
Oh, thank God you didn't make a gritty joke.
No, oh,
well done.
That would have been perfect. Oh my goodness!
I thought you somehow resisted. I apologize.
I'm picturing him in my head right now. I can't believe I dropped the ball on that one. 24 points on the season, among the league leaders in penalty minutes. Few people play a tougher game than Wayne Simmons, but they are in a predicament right now. They're only 6 points out of a playoff spot in a Metropolitan Division that has seen several teams go on really hot streaks. The New York Islanders, who continue to sit atop the division. How do you roll out the Penguins? How do you roll out the Capitals?
Yeah,
you've got the bottom feeders in the Devils, the Rangers. I don't think they'll make a run. But I mean, now the question's asked. First, like, what's his price, or are we even willing to part with him? We got a good thing going.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you say, they still have some ground to make up. But if you're a Philadelphia Flyers fan right now and you're looking and thinking, hey, the team is rolling pretty good right now. They've won, I think they're 9-0-1 in their last 10 games or something like that. And Wayne Simmons is undoubtedly the kind of player that if you can keep that going and you can squeak your way into the playoffs, he's an invaluable piece for that team.
And that's why you got some pretty big contenders suiting him. Boston, Tampa, Nashville, Winnipeg, Toronto, all reportedly in on Wayne Simmons, have contacted the team to see what his price would be if he is in fact available. Apparently, Toronto and Tampa among the most aggressive, which shouldn't really come as a surprise to too many people. You have to find out what the price is, but with a team like the Leafs, especially lacking that physicality and size in their top 6 unit, especially the physicality end, you figure that would be someone they would want to check in on.
Well, and it is very interesting with the Leafs, as we being Toronto Maple Leaf fans are a little closer, a little more familiar with their situation. They do have several players and several pieces that it's pretty well being believed that they're not going to be able to hold on to.
Right.
When this season goes into free agency and they do re-sign Mitch Marner, because Mitch Marner is not going anywhere, they are going to re-sign Mitch Marner. That makes it tough to re-sign a few other pieces like Connor Brown, Andreas Johnsson, Kasperi Kapanen.
Yeah.
They need to find room for all of these guys, and it's going to be tough. So you look at a situation like this where, hey, we can possibly upgrade from one of those guys for a rental player that's really going to help us in the playoffs, or at least we think is really going to help us. And that way we technically don't lose these guys for nothing.
Right.
So it's an interesting situation for the Leafs. I don't know. I assume it's a pretty similar situation in Tampa Bay. I mean, with the talent they have on that roster, you got to think the cap crunch is pretty real for Tampa Bay looking into the future. And then there's the Artemi Panarin situation in Columbus. The Blue Jackets kind of in a similar situation to Philly. They've been playing really well lately. They're sitting in third place in the Metropolitan Division. Artemi Panarin is arguably their best player, definitely their best offensive player. And there's a lot of waffling. Do we want to stick with this guy and make a run at things, or because he actually spoke about it over the weekend and did not instill any confidence in a Columbus Blue Jacket fan. He kind of laughed at the suggestion of, do you see yourself re-signing or sticking around? And he's like, maybe. Anything could happen, I guess.
It was pretty. I feel like from a management standpoint, their hands are a lot more tied than Phil. It almost feels like they have to pull the trigger in the next 2 weeks. He's made it very clear he wants to test free agency and do what's best for him. And like you said, laughed off the notion of potentially re-signing in Columbus. And then you've got the drama of him, potential drama of him signing with the same agent and as his countrymen, fellow Blue Jackets, impending UFA, we should add, Sergei Bobrovsky. Could they be packaged together? You've heard the Florida rumors. Could they make their way there somehow. So I feel like from a management standpoint, they got to try and figure something out here.
It's a good thing John Tortorella is just the head coach and not the general manager of that team. Oh, man. His head would have exploded after that.
There'd be some sound bites, for sure.
There would be some sound bites. All right. We are going to finish off this week's show with some very special audio. The Westminster Kennel Club Dog Show went down this past weekend. And the big story, Rudy the Bulldog. People were betting against a Bulldog named Rudy. Why would you ever bet against anything or anyone named Rudy? Anyway, Rudy took part in the Agility Contest Championship, and it went a little something like this.
Okay, walk it.
Wow! Rudy's got some motoring skills.
Jump. Tunnel. Go back.
Just an off course. 5 faults.
Go,
got
jump,
back on course.
Jump.
Don't worry about it. Hang in there.
Climb it.
Here we go.
Back.
Got that backside that time.
Go jump. Weave.
Here come these weave poles. Come on, nobody expected this out of a Bulldog tonight. Wow, that was awesome.
I agree with you. Nobody ever thought the Bulldog would come out the way that Rudy just did.
Oh, he came flying off that dog walk.